Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Hey, welcome to Richard Listens on Sports. I'm Peter Sobey, and right next to me is Dr. Richard. Hi, Dr. Richard.
Hi, Walter Payton.
Yes, yesterday was
full regalia.
Yeah, there was a big event in football yesterday in the NFL, National Football League. Have you heard of it?
I heard of some avocado commercials and some funny Tide commercials.
Yes.
And an amazing game.
It was an amazing game. Just when you thought that last year's Super Bowl couldn't be topped.
Amazingly devastating.
Yes. Caitlin's in the studio, too. So we should welcome her because it was a devastating game for her since she's from Boston.
Devastating.
Sympathy applause.
Yes. So, yeah, as exciting as the Patriots' comeback was last year, whether you're a Patriots fan or not, this was just, one punt in this game. It was just offense. Like more offense than any other NFL game in history. Not just Super Bowls, not playoffs, like any game ever in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, it was incredible to see the high performance. Of course, we expect it from Tom Terrific. But, Nick Foles did what he could not do for us in the fantasy football finals, so we forgive you, Nick Foles, and congratulate
You're
him.
still holding that grudge against Nick. That was his one bad week.
Well, you see what happens when you play in the wind and then you go in a dome.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you can become a lot more accurate in your performance.
That one game when, they lost 15-9 or something like that? That was like before Doug Peterson really embraced the whole play-action run thing that they basically do every single play. But Foles is so good at like half the times it looks like he's handing the ball off. But then it's like, he's passing the ball. Like that's got to be so hard. That split second gives his guys that moment to get open. It's amazing.
So congratulations to one of our arch nemesis, the Philadelphia Eagles. We can't beat them.
But, here at Richard Listens that you can be watching on UBN Radio TV, or you might be watching us on Facebook.com/RichardListens, where if you leave a comment or a question, we'll try to get to it live on air. And we try to mention everyone we see checking in, but a lot of times, like, I'll see that we have many, many eyeballs looking, but I only see, like, a few names. So if I don't mention you, it's not because I've got something against you. I just didn't see your name. But thanks for checking in with your questions. And like we said, we have Caitlin in the studio today, which is very exciting. We had her in studio in December, and now she is back in studio with us. And always, always fun to have Caitlin in studio and involved in the whole process and interacting with our guests. And we have a really, really, really great guest today that's involved in a sport that isn't talked about a lot, which we also pride ourselves here on Richard Listens on Sports. Not only talking about sports that maybe people don't talk about all the time, but the whole psychological edge with Dr. Richard, the psychologist.
Yeah, and single-handedly trying to continue my adult career into sports, how hard it is to lift and lift correctly, and you guys made fun of me for even some of the terms. But, yeah, even how to take care of your body and build strength. So I'm excited to learn from our guest, Brian, about all that.
Yes, some hardcore weightlifting. So we'll have him on in just a couple of minutes. He's waiting in the wings via Zoom. But first, since we have Caitlin here, besides great interactions to come during the show, she is still our fitness wellness expert. And what great fitness wellness tip do you have for us today, Caitlin?
Well, I was actually planning on talking a lot of these kind of things out with Brian because I think we've actually spent a lot of time doing a lot of the same things in our fitness journeys through life from CrossFit to strength and conditioning training and all these different things. So if we don't mind doing it a little differently this week, I kind of want to see what Brian has to say and see if we have anything to match up and kind of see how our journeys have almost transformed maybe something that was a habit before transitioned to something different. Because I had a time when I was starting off as CrossFit, and it seems that Brian has too, and that whole point of my life when I had started competing with CrossFit kind of changed and got me interested into competitive powerlifting and weightlifting. So I'm kind of wondering if Brian had a similar journey and how he's kind of had, if he's had any hiccups like me along the way of injuries that you've had to change gears and kind of, I guess, recalculate what you can do in the gym or cannot do.
So that sounds good. We will incorporate fitness tips within the interview with our guest. As Caitlin said, our guest's name is Brian. It is Brian Reisenauer, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Brian, because we've been calling you Brian for ages, but never really had to tackle your last name. But Brian is a really amazing person. He's getting into CrossFit competition now, but he is an Olympic weightlifter. I mean, this is like hardcore weightlifting. And he's got a whole, here at RichardListens on Sport, we like to talk about sports and life and the intersections between. And certainly Brian's story is a really fascinating story, how he came from where he was to being an elite athlete on the Olympic weight training circuit. So without further ado, let's get him out here. Brian Reisenauer, welcome to RichardListens on Sports.
You're welcome, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Excellent.
Where are you at right now, Brian?
Currently, I'm actually in the vacant portion of my gym that I'll be soon opening up. So I'm actually in an empty storefront right now that will soon be part of my gym.
Is this a new gym outside of Kilo for Kilo, or is this Kilo for Kilo?
This will be Kilo for Kilo's new headquarter, one of our main locations that will be our centerpiece, along with our affiliates throughout different spots.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's all part of your journey. We want to get into that. But first, I kind of, here at RichardListens on Sports, Brian, we've got a resident psychologist, Dr. Richard Olberger, right here. And first, can you kind of just talk a little bit about, before we get into your fitness place, your weight training, your CrossFit, all of that, tell us just a little bit about your journey.
Well, first of all, I'd really like to say how excited I am, especially because Richard is a psychologist, that I am also seeking my doctorate in psychology as well. So that's kind of exciting for me to be able to talk alongside one as well. But with my journey itself, I started out, I'm from Fargo, North Dakota, small town in North Dakota. Actually, it's the biggest town in North Dakota, but still very small.
That everyone's heard of now because of
school.
TV and movies.
Yes, exactly, from the movies. We don't kill as many people as you might think, but we try to keep that to a minimum. But I grew up there. I did mostly gymnastics and wrestling throughout my high school career, and then I went on to do wrestling in college at Minnesota State University Mankato, where I wrestled and started there for a few years. In the 2012 year, I tried out for the Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling. I was unsuccessful, obviously, and that was kind of my retirement party. After a few years of just relaxing and just taking time off from sports, I kind of eased my way back into the fitness realm, doing CrossFit and competing in that. After a little while, I became a little frustrated with the competition side of CrossFit and shifted my focus more towards Olympic weightlifting. And that's been my focus for the past few years.
And what exactly is Olympic weightlifting for our watchers out there that might be unsure? And maybe even me. I'm not going to admit that, but,
Olympic weightlifting consists of two different lifts, the snatch and the clean and jerk. In competition, you're allowed to do 3 lifts in each of those 2 lifts. and your highest number in each lift combined goes towards your total, and that's how they determine placement.
The snap and the clean and jerk.
Snatch.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's even funnier. Like, what about
Yes, apparently the Olympic weightlifters back in the day had dirty minds as well.
Yes.
Exactly. They were not happy with me last week. They left me on the carpet last week making fun of me, thinking I was making up these terms.
Right. Hey, I'm competing in the snatch. You're what? That's crazy.
Well, and those are full
Yeah, I've had to
body
explain it a
movements.
few times.
Yeah. Yeah. So Brian, we ran through that real quick there. So now wrestling, was it like, were you interested in athletics? Like, how did you come to that decision early in life, primarily to get into wrestling?
Well, it started very early in my life, both gymnastics and wrestling. I started around age 3 or 4. My father wrestled in college, so that was his choice. And my mother decided on gymnastics. So that was their compromise. I would do both. And I just fell in love with both of them. Wrestling took over purely because my gymnastics coach at the time moved away. And so I was just left with wrestling, which dominated the rest of my athletic career at that time.
Now, Greco-Roman wrestling is a lot more like throwing people. Is it a lot harder at a shorter stature to compete in, or are the rules the same?
It can depend. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. Taller guys tend to have better levers, making it a little bit easier to make some throws, but shorter athletes tend to be able to maneuver a little bit more quickly, do different techniques such as duck unders, pass bys, things like that, where they can have the advantage as well. So there's a kind of a mixed bag of who has the advantage depending on who's able to make their technique work for the match.
And you mentioned your dad was a college wrestler, and we know how much a parent who's been an athlete can influence us. Did he ever take on coaching, or we've seen some of the photos with him in your corner?
Yes.
Although his website looks like he's much more interested in nature photos these days. So
he is. He's kind of enjoying that right now. But yes, he was always my coach throughout most of my career. In high school, he was even in my corner. Even sometimes in my college matches, he managed to get in there. He was definitely the biggest influence in my wrestling career and was always my coach and always was at every single one of my competitions. I'm not even sure if he ever missed a single one, to be honest.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I want to start getting to some of Caitlin's questions, but one more thing, Brian, in this whole thing that we're talking about, I was reading the About You section on your Kilo for Kilo website. And when you decided to get into the weightlifting, you said you had no idea what you were doing. You had no idea about like coaches, like pregame warm up, pre-lift warm up, none of this stuff. You just showed up and you were like, I'm going to lift when they tell me to lift, whatever weight it is. And somehow you advance and then you hooked up with a coach and
Well, so slow that down, Peter, right there. So how do you make that shift into something, right? Here's Dad's teaching you and you're skilled in something, and then all of a sudden something switches. You decided to leap into the unknown. What do you attribute that to?
Right. Well, after the tryout for 2012, the Olympic trials, and I didn't make the team, I kind of decided that I was going to be done with athletics altogether. It was time to move on. I graduated college. I was going to just, become, another normal person working and living my life without sports. And I was okay with that. I was kind of a little burnt out from doing the whole athletic thing. And so for about 2 years, I didn't step foot in a gym. I didn't do anything fitness related at all. Then when I decided to try to step back in and just get in a little bit better shape, I entered the CrossFit realm, started getting into that, and then it just kind of grew from there. The only reason I actually picked to do an Olympic weightlifting competition was my box owner for the CrossFit gym I was at kind of noticed my frustration with some of the competitive CrossFit events and decided that I would be a good weightlifter. I was strong for my size. I moved fairly well well. So she just suggested that I try one out. Maybe I would like that a little bit better. And it just kind of took off from there.
But was there one point after that 2 years of being out of sports that you did miss it? Like, what was that point when you're like, you sought something out and you found the CrossFitting, which led to the weightlifting?
To be honest, the point was the girlfriend I had was sick of me sitting on a couch and doing nothing after work.
Okay, now we're getting to the real deal.
Yeah,
Too much video games.
She was done with my laziness, so I decided, well, I'll go and do that. A couple of my wrestling buddies said that I would be pretty good at CrossFit. I had a really good engine at the time, and a few other things from wrestling. So they said I'd be good at it, and I decided to give it a shot.
And you excelled at it.
Yeah.
That's amazing stuff.
You mind if I jump in here, guys?
Yeah, get in there, Caitlin.
So, Brian, it's so funny because I feel like it was very similar too. I was, did organized sports all through regular school until I got out of college. And then, I kind of took a break. And then I ended up finding CrossFit and started competing with CrossFit. I CrossFitted actually cross country when I was tour managing, and I went to all these CrossFits all over. I actually remember being in Flagstaff, Arizona was one of my toughest ones because I was dealing with elevation at the time, and then that transitioned to, actually becoming a competitive bodybuilder, and then I followed with competitive powerlifting. So is it that one of my questions for you was because you had so much experience with CrossFit, and I noticed that you kind of mentioned that on your site that was in a place where it kind of, that was where you began when you kind of re-begun, your fitness after school. So did you have favorite lifts or anything? Because the Olympic lifts are so different than, a powerlifting lift, where the powerlifting lifts are your deadlift, your bench, where the Olympic lifts are different that you were using. So do you feel that you found that the two lifts that you competed with in the Olympic weightlifting were something that you just preferred, or that your body suited better? Because do you agree that certain people are built differently and built better for certain lifts?
Well, there are those that are built better to do the lifts. I picked Olympic weightlifting instead of powerlifting because of my more athletic background. These two lifts are very dynamic in movement. They involve a lot of athleticism and a lot of body awareness and movement that require you to be fully aware of everything you're doing. If a little thing hiccups, the whole lift goes away. In powerlifting, it's much more static. It's an easy down and up, or just an up and a down. If it's a deadlift, a lot more strength based, not as much athleticism involved. So with my athletic background from wrestling and gymnastics, the big lifts just seem to suit me better than the powerlifting.
And now I know when I went from bodybuilding to powerlifting, my training regimen changed drastically. So when you started training, how much did you stay on kind of a normal strength and conditioning type of, did you use periodization training, which is kind of what a normal powerlifter might use? Or,
I also use a cycle periodization as well. It undulates. It's about every 3 weeks on, and then 1 week of a down week, and it periodized. First starting with more of a hypertrophy sort of cycle, moving into a strength, and then usually a peaking. So it's usually about a 3-month periodized cycle that I go through, depending on when competitions are coming up. That can change a little bit, but that's usually my standard.
And then how much were you focused on your diet during that time?
Initially, not at all. I was very poor about my diet. I did it very much based on my past experience from wrestling. It was a very big dive cut where I would lose 10 to 15 pounds within 2 weeks, if not even smaller amount of time than that. And I would eventually realize that was draining me of my strength when I got to competition. Now, nutrition is one of the biggest factors that I focus on when I do my training. It's one of the most important things that it comes to my training, because I'm on the upper end of my weight class and I need to be able to stay hydrated, stay with a good nutrition program so I don't wear myself out and dig myself a deeper hole trying to work hard without the proper calories.
So you don't use any of that like super hydration or anything like that to gain a lot of weights right before competition or vice versa?
I will do a water cut right before competition. That actually just consists of me drinking more water than normal, which kind of tricks the body into wanting to get rid of all that water, and it'll actually do a water cut all on its own. So that'll help me lose about 2 kilos that way. But that's all I'll do for a water cut.
And what is your diet like? Because here in the studio, I'm eating a donut because, you know,
Because the
my
nutritionist brought the donuts.
It was
in.
it was a welcoming Caitlin to LA donut.
yes, and you know,
Can you make exceptions for birthdays, Brian? What happens if someone puts birthday cake in front of you on your way out of Kilo for Kilo?
Well, lucky for me, birthday cake
You
does
burn it
not
off
tempt.
instantly.
But I do have the cheat day. I actually try to schedule my cheat days as best as I can. It's usually about every 10 days. I'll take a meal, maybe even 2, probably pack on a couple extra, calories onto each one. Usually it'll look like about 100 carbs more than my normal day, give or take. I'll, enjoy a burger. I'll enjoy pizza, whatever I'm feeling like. But it's important to do stuff like that, I think, because if you don't, it becomes monotonous, it becomes boring, and you don't want to do it. And when you don't want to do something, eventually you just stop. And then it can get out of control very quickly.
And I can agree. And I'm going to insert that fitness wellness tip right
All
here.
right.
Because,
there we go.
yes, because same thing is eventually you'll plateau in anything you do. If you keep doing the same thing all the time, whether that is your fitness regimen or your, nutrition regimen, which I'm sure you can relate, because in my experiences with food and that it's to give the body a rest, and you need to amp it up at times for both your nutrition and your exercise. I mean, do you feel that you've experienced that and you've kind of learned that through your body the hard way, Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The body wants to find a homeostasis. It wants to find a point where it can just rest and do nothing. And sometimes you have to give it a little extra food to be able to kind of recharge. Maybe the metabolism starts guessing a little bit more, and then you can go back down into your diet again. But sometimes that refeed meal, that cheat meal, does the body a lot of good, and you can see actual weight loss immediately after that as well.
Well, and I'm glad you used the word refeed, because you read my mind, because I kind of did that even the other day. And it's like the day that I do have that, quote unquote cheat meal, I actually looked better the next day than I would think. You eat something like ice cream, or like Peter is eating his donut. Peter, you're actually going to look better tomorrow.
Wow, I'm so
from
excited.
Your donut.
Although, don't make the audience think that eating a donut a day
Not all
keeps
the
the
time,
doctor
like
away. But
every couple of weeks, we're saying.
yeah.
Right.
Wow, I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm going to be shining.
Well, if you're like Peter and I, we talk about the donuts more than we actually eat them. It's like this
Yes.
motivational thing that keeps us going. People think we eat a lot more donuts than we do.
Totally. And, my Instagram name is Donut Spirit, but
There you
I
go.
always explain to people it's more about the essence of donuts than eating donuts. It's like what
Sure,
they
the
mean.
idea of it.
Yeah, what they mean to the fabric of our society in America, and gathering at the donut shop and
It's true.
pouring a cup of coffee and talking to old Joe, that sort of thing.
So, Brian, do you have your favorite cheat meal? Do you have one go-to that is it's like, oh, I did my work, this is my reward?
Usually it's pizza for me.
Good choice.
It definitely depends. Usually I'll actually end up, especially after a competition, is when I really get to enjoy myself. I usually take a whole week off after competition, and I get to enjoy any foods that I want. And so I'll write up a nice big list of all the things that I miss. And then probably by halfway through that week, it's no longer interesting anymore. It kind of is interesting how when you romanticize food like that, how quickly you bounce back and you don't really want it anymore after it's all said and done.
Wow, that's an interesting technique. I mean, you could probably use that for other aspects of your life as well. What do you think, Dr. Richard? Making a list of things you think you desire, but then the more you look at them, do I really desire this?
Yeah, I think there's something to writing down anything, even if it's vacations. It just gives power to it once you put it on paper and takes it out of this kind of lack place of things I'm not doing because I'm training. When you realize you could give yourself a reward for training really hard or competing in a competition, but probably along the way, that's an interesting point about your journey, Brian. I mean, you probably get a lot from actually showing up at the competition, especially if your dad is with you. I mean, how much of it is it about the actual result, and how much of it is it about the experience, and how do you keep those separate?
That's really tough, especially with my most recent experience with Worlds back in the end of November, beginning of December there, where I was, as a competitor, as somebody who wants to always do his best, is always results driven. That's how I measure success, and it's a lot easier to measure success in weightlifting because you just see numbers go up. So it's easy to measure success, whereas other sports such as wrestling, it's harder to measure that because you may be improving, but you still may be taking on losses, or maybe even winning, but you don't know that you're getting better. So it's a lot different aspect of training when you can actually see improvement and being more results driven. Now, unfortunately, sometimes competitions don't go exactly how you want, and then it's about the experience and what you can take away and learn from it, which is kind of bittersweet, but most often is the most important part of weightlifting or any sport, is to be able to take away from those losses, those times where you don't get exactly what you want or what you wanted, and being able to come back and try to improve on the next time.
This is beautiful because this taps into the psychology, which you're a student of. I want to hear some about that as well. But right, the ability to process what you're saying, right, to be critical or aware enough to process perceived failure or lack of meeting our goals, right? And so what is your process then? What is your, who do you have a mastermind? Do you sit down with dad or coach? Do you look at what happened on that given day? Do you say, hey, gee, the guy next to me just had a great performance? I mean, how do you walk that through, and do you give it a couple days before you look it over?
I absolutely give it a couple days to look it over. For me, especially when I was at Worlds, I've become aware that sometimes when I don't meet my own expectations, that my mind will race, and then I can't be reasoned with. Logic doesn't live in my brain at that time because I'm just overly upset with myself, with my performance. And so sometimes I have to take those few days to relax, to be able to get my head on straight, and then to look back and see what I could have done differently, what could have gone differently. Was it really me? Was it something else? And most of the time, you can always find something that you can work on that can be improved. And then you make up a plan to improve those weaknesses and to make sure that hopefully that never happens again.
Yeah, and this is highly competitive. This is unique because it all comes down to that. I mean, what is that, 5-10 seconds? I mean, I'm sure they give you some time to walk up, prepare I mean, how much time do they give you? And is there like one thing that you do or say to yourself to get yourself ready for that intense burst of performance? Because really it's down to, less than minutes, right?
Yeah, and I had a question too of like, how similar is it to when you're in a powerlifting scenario? Because we would just you have time to warm up and you kind of wait till your time to go up, and you pull that weight or you don't. I don't know if that's the same with Olympic weightlifting.
It is about the same. You take your warm-ups in the back. When it's your turn, you get 1 minute to complete your lift. Most of the time, most people will get that 1 minute clock. If you end up actually following yourself, you get a 2 minute clock. So it gives you a little bit more time to rest. Some people can do some movement and stuff like that to try and, make it so that they have more rest time, or somebody else has less rest time or something like that. But most of the time you'll get that 1 minute to try and attempt to make your lift. On the other part of that question where, what do I tell myself before I walk out? I actually completely tell myself nothing. I am completely zoned out the moment that I step up on that stage. Most of the time, I hate to admit this since my coaches probably won't like it, but I don't even hear what they say before I walk on the stage. I'm kind of zoned out into my own little world, and I kind of trust my body to know that it knows what to do. At this point, it's been months of training. Nothing that I tell myself is going to change anything for the better. My body already knows what to do, and I trust it.
That's an incredible, healthy way to have your mindset before going to competition. I wish I knew that from one of my first competitions, but I feel like I've evolved to that point before I would go out there. That I relate that I kind of black out when I would compete. Is that kind of, you just kind of don't know?
Absolutely. That's essentially the point. Many times, especially when I wrestled, I couldn't tell you anything that happened during the match. I'd have to watch it on video because I couldn't tell you anything that happens. It's more of just flowing, letting what happens, and trusting your body and all that practice that you put in to do what it needs to do.
What about from another psychological level? You know, we've had competitive figure skaters, American ninjas on the show. When you're kind of waiting in the wings for your turn and say someone right before you just kills the routine, they kill the course. In your case, they lift this crazy amount of weight. Does that play with your head at all, or are you still able to even tune that out and just trust in your training?
I learned actually from wrestling to never watch any of my competitors ever. It did mess with my mind way too much. I would see results from other competitions where they lifted a lot of weight, or if in wrestling, you know, they beat somebody and they just killed them, and I had a hard time beating them and things like that. So I would get immediately intimidated by that person, or I would think that, well, there's no way I can beat them. They lifted this much on that day, and there's no chance. Or if it's right before I lifted and they made their lift, I actually try never to pay attention to any other lifts happening. I go out and do my lifts. I'm trying to have the best day that I can have. And if I do that, then there's nothing else that I could have done. There's no way I could have beat that person if they had their best day, I had my best day, and they lifted more. So there's no use in me concerning myself with what they're doing. I just need to make sure that I'm trying to hit the best numbers that I can on that day.
So let's get this a little bit more difficult for you, Brian, because someday it's going to be Brian the coach or Brian the psychologist, maybe, who knows, working with an athlete. So, and I appreciate what you said about trusting your body. That's an amazing thing. But you also mentioned before, there are times when your mind might be racing. This is natural, right? You're an athlete. Something happens that puts you in a place where there's some emotional attachment to what just happened, right? Whether it's a big strikeout
Absolutely.
Or whether it's missing my, expectation of what my weightlifting progression is going to be, or how the weightlift was going to go, how smooth. So what would you tell a young weightlifter out there, somebody who's maybe having a difficult time getting that anxiety or restlessness out of their mind and getting back into their training? What's one technique or tool that you might guide them to?
That is a tough one. That's a good question. I can kind of relate to this one. Like I said, at Worlds was not my best performance, and I missed my first 2 lifts, and you only get 3. And if you don't make one, then you don't get to post a total, and you're basically done with the competition. So I had to actually reel it in myself a little bit mentally, because when your back is up against the wall, it's tough to trust yourself and make that lift. But the one thing that I can suggest to some of the lifters or anybody who's having trouble getting some anxiety walking onto that platform, maybe for the first time or maybe the 50th time, but you're still having that anxiety, is to go through a routine. One of the best things that's helped me calm down, because being on a stage with everybody looking at you still can create some anxiety no matter how many times you've competed, is that trying to find a routine, something you can do in the practice room, in the gym, that you do every single time, that lets you know that everything is okay. Setting up with your feet, setting up your hands, going through your routine for your startup, doing the same sort of walkout when you go onto the platform, whatever it may be, something that allows you to create a routine that can help calm your nerves, because you do that every single time, and you can feel a little bit more at home when you do that routine.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really, wonderful tip to make it like it's your home, to where you're practicing, so that you're not focusing on the people watching you, and just focusing on it's like another day in the gym. And that must get easier for you the more competitions you do, or did it get a little bit more challenging now that you're on the world stage?
It's hard to say. I still feel the butterflies when I go on the stage each time. I have just been able to learn that that's a part of what competing is all about. I didn't really feel that as much when I wrestled or even when I was doing gymnastics, but I still get those butterflies now. And I've just learned that that's kind of part of the ride. It's just along with me. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I'm going to do well. It doesn't mean I'm going to do badly. It's just a part of it. And so I still feel those butterflies, not so much in practice, but still when I step up on this stage, that does happen. So it's gotten a little bit easier to get used to now that I've learned that, it's just kind of, like I said, along for the ride is the best way I can put it. And you just kind of adapt and learn from that.
And kind of speaking of being on stage and people watching you, we've got Jewel Hargrove watching us on Facebook.com. We've
Awesome.
got Courtney Olberger, wife of Dr. Richard Olberger. Hi, Courtney. Thanks for watching. Like I said, we can't see everyone's name that's watching, but if you check in, we might mention you, or if you have a question or comment, we'll try and get to it on air. Facebook.com, RichardListens. So continuing on, so Brian, we do want to hear about what you are currently up to. So like you said, you're opening a new facility. Is this in addition to your Kilo for Kilo facility?
Yes, this is kind of the headquarters. I want to say like the centerpiece of Kilo for Kilo. It will be a very large barbell Olympic weightlifting gym, along with a fitness, strength, and conditioning portion as well. Hopefully to bring in many of my athletes I have that are kind of sparse around the city into one spot, get some more athletes in. Also trying to attach also a nonprofit to it, hopefully to help bring some kids into Olympic weightlifting a little bit more, which would be great to have some more kids around, see them grow in the sport, and even in maybe athletic performance for all sorts of other sports as well.
Wow, it's amazing you bring that up, because as you were talking, I was going to ask you, like, are you going to do something for, at-risk youth or kids that might not be able to afford to get into the sport? So that's amazing. And so you will start a nonprofit.
I'm very excited about.
And you'll start the nonprofit to get them in.
Yes, that's the key. Hopefully get maybe some sponsorships, donations to help us get them through. I know trying to set up some sort of transportation probably may be one of the challenges, but hopefully we'll be able to work that out through the nonprofit to help them get to the gym, or possibly us entering into their own schools and helping that way.
What's your youngest client, Brian, and how young do you recommend? We see some photos up here of some pretty young weightlifters. How young do you recommend, especially with healthy development, people getting started?
Well, one of the misconceptions about weightlifting and fitness in general, let me see if I can turn the light on. Nope. Okay.
Yes,
I don't have power apparently either.
we can still see you.
And now I think we're actually losing Brian a little bit.
Move back.
Yeah, maybe move back. We lost. Okay, now we got you again, Brian. Go back to where you were at first. However it moved, ended up losing your signal. It's a little bit in and out, and Brian is in the dark now at his new place that he's building out, which happens during construction sometimes. So,
can you hear us, Brian?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, now we hear you.
There you go. Perfect. You're lit well too. You're good.
You're good.
And I got light. Yeah. I got it figured out. Anyways, what I was going to say is one of the common misconceptions about fitness and weightlifting is the damage it can do to a child's body, growth plates, things of that nature. And that is a misconception. It actually can be done safely and healthily. with younger kids. You asked what one of my younger athletes are. I have actually a girl that is about 5-6 years old that does some of my strength and conditioning. I think the video that you were posting had her in it actually. And as long as you make it, fun and exciting and they enjoy it. This one is actually Olivia. She's 8 or 9 years old, I believe. She's a great little lifter. And as long as you teach them the fundamentals, the technique, and how to safely perform these movements, there's no reason why younger children can't participate in this sport.
And I think that you would be such an amazing role model for young aspiring athletes across the board and I'm not putting this up in any sort of bad sense, but you are 5 feet 2 inches tall, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Did you face a lot growing up? Like people must have every step of the way said, "Oh, Brian, you can't be an athlete. You're too small,"
I have ran into that on a few occasions. I was excited about all sports when I was younger. I played tons of other sports. I played football. I played basketball. I tried out hockey for a little while, some other sports in between. But size was always generally a factor for me. And so that's kind of how wrestling and gymnastics kind of made their way through. They didn't tend to discriminate as much against the little guy. Obviously, wrestling has those lower weight classes, and gymnasts actually have somewhat of an advantage when they have that shorter stature. So
that's an interesting point, Brian. I want to turn Peter's question that way. Can you remember one time you could share for all our people out there who, are not 6'4" and someone sticks a basketball in their hand like me, right? What one time when you noticed that it was a strength where somebody said, "Hey, you can do something and you can be elite, not and not be held back at all." In fact,
they were like, "You can do it."
Well, there was a few. Obviously, my dad and my mother, both of them, were great about telling me that settling doesn't have to happen, that you can succeed. You just need to find a way or find something that you can excel at, regardless of what it is. Be good at whatever you do. That kind of idea that whatever it is you do, just try to be the best at it. And so they helped me find that kind of motivation and that kind of attitude moving forward in whatever I did, if it was school, if it was athletics, if it was anything at all. If you're, the best computer programmer, try to be the best computer programmer, whatever it may be. And so they were really good about helping me feel that kind of motivation towards anything I did.
That's amazing.
Now, is it actually a strength for you to be more compact with your density of strength for weightlifting?
Yes, there is advantage to having shorter stature for weightlifting. Actually, for my weight class that I currently lift in, which is the 56 kilogram weight class, I'm actually considered tall for that weight class.
Wow.
Most coaches would prefer me to move up to the next weight class as a 62 kilogram lifter. I've just decided to stay as a 56 just because as long as I'm excelling in it, I feel that as long as I can make the weight class, it'll work out. Unfortunately, the International Weightlifting Federation will be changing the weight classes soon, and so there will be all new weight classes. So there may be a little shift in what weight I will be competing at.
Wow.
So we are getting close to wrapping you up here, Brian, and before you leave, we will have you give some information so people can reach out to you. But Caitlin, any last questions from you for Brian?
I guess, now that you're starting your own facility, Kilo for Kilo, you already currently have one, correct? Or you have multiple locations? I guess I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, I have just small locations. Most of them are within CrossFit boxes, leasing small space, things like that, where I do strength and conditioning and Olympic weightlifting training within those gyms. And then this will be the first one that I basically will own all on my own, independent from any other place.
So what will the structure be like in your new facility with Kilo for Kilo? Is it just going to be, membership based where people can, do monthly memberships and they're using your facility? Is everything going to be, one-on-one based, or, how is the structure of what you're going to offer the people that will be your future clients at your new establishment?
Sure. So I've kind of decided to take a different approach than I've seen in most gyms. I'm kind of offering what would be, I guess, an a la carte sort of scenario for the gym. You can pay a monthly membership fee, which gives you access to the gym, basically open gym scenario where you can come in, do whatever workouts that you have that you maybe have planned. Then you can add on basically upcharges where you can purchase programming through me, custom made or templated. You can purchase classes where you can attend classes, which is another one. I wanted people to be able to buy what they want, not get a bunch of things that they don't need and pay for everything. So I want people to be able to have access to exactly what they want, what they're looking for, and not be overcharged for it.
And I have to applaud you for that, because like I said, I travel a lot. I'm always at new gyms trying things, and we need more gyms that offer, more flexibility in what, an individual is looking for. So I think you're going to be super successful. I hope I can visit your gym someday, and I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm excited for you too, Brian, because now you're going to be able to take all of your skills and motivation as an athlete and put them into being an entrepreneur. Are you excited about that?
I'm very excited about it. Obviously, it's been a lot of work. I know that Richard can probably attest to this, but the doctorate program does take up a lot of time and energy. So this has been kind of a slow process for me to try to get this thing running, because I don't have a ton of spare time. But I am very excited for it to start getting open and start taking on more clients and getting to see people enjoy fitness again.
Can you attest to that, Dr. Richard?
I certainly can. I think it's time for you to interview some marathon runners whose journey takes a lot longer time. Yeah, it is. And it's very hard to want to set out and select few people like Peter or Caitlin, who I find myself drawn to, who want to succeed in multiple levels and in multiple arenas of life. And that may mean we don't get the gratification from, taking on as many clients all at once. And it's hard because the competitor or the person that knows we can maybe wants to swing one way or the other. But it's a noble journey, as many people have told me, to even think about a PhD and complete it. And no doubt it can help you in working with the mind-body interaction. My only question is, does that mean that you're training, do you step back off it, or does it still get worked in to the whole scheme?
It still does get worked in every once in a while. Some things do tend to interrupt it, whether it be school or other lifters and clients sometimes. But I try to still stick to my regimen as much as possible. Obviously, my goal is the 2020 Olympics, and so we're still building towards that. It's still a long quad. We're only halfway through it. So it's not a sprint. It's kind of a marathon sort of thing where we just have to have a very long, well thought out plan to make sure that I have enough time to be able to get my workouts in and still be able to do everything else.
And so, Brian, to wrap things up here, I was going to ask you, how people can reach out to you. And actually, one of our viewers, Tom Ware, came into the show a little bit late and
wants to find you in Anaheim if you're
yeah,
around
he
there.
noticed your Anaheim T-shirt, but you are not in Anaheim, are you?
No, I am in Phoenix, Arizona. The Anaheim shirt is from Worlds. That's where the World Weightlifting competition was this year in November. So I just kind of, I guess, threw this on and unfortunately gave the wrong message there. But I am actually in Phoenix, Arizona.
And people can reach you by going to the website, which is?
Yes, you can reach me by going to the website, which is right there. It's www.kilo4kilosc.com. Obviously, if you find me on Facebook, either the Kilo for Kilo page right there or my own personal page, which is showing, I'm pretty quick to respond on both of those pages. Either one, I'm more than happy to answer any questions about anything that I offer, or if you're looking for something a little bit different, I'm usually pretty accommodating and I can work something out with the person. So
amazing. Well, Brian, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for spending your afternoon with us here. And I think our viewers got a lot from your story and your motivation. So thank you for being our guest here on Richard Listens on Sports.
Thank you. Congratulations
you.
all you're doing, Brian.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
That's awesome.
All right. Brian Reisenauer.
Role models.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like a lot of the advice he gave can be applied to any aspect of life.
No, and the more and more we have more guests on these shows, too, I realize how much, every sport translates to a lot of the same journeys in a sense of what you feel or what your challenges are throughout the way.
And it's so innate, right? He didn't just choose any brand of psychology, by the way. He's choosing forensic psychology, which it means he's sometimes there's some people with some challenges and difficulties in society. So fearless you are, Brian. We can talk more about that
Absolutely.
offline.
And I'd like to thank Jarvis Essex, our amazing engineer. He had all of Brian's info on the screen as Brian was talking and videos. Amazing job, like always. We want to thank you for watching Richard Listens on Sports. You can always reach out to Richard
on Instagram at Richard Listens, Richard at RichardListens.com, and Facebook / Richard Listens. Please follow the blogs and reach out to us. Brian is an example. Listeners who have reached out, talked to us, shared their experiences, and offered to come on the show. This is what this is about. This is the social media age. Connect with us. We want to share your stories. If you're inspiring people and you inspire us, if we inspire you, let's connect.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Brian reached out to us through Instagram, and we formed a relationship, and here he is on the show.
Yeah, so shout out to Jewel Hargrove.
Yes, and Caitlin, how can people reach out to you for getting more of those excellent fitness and wellness tips? And
Yes, you guys can find me on Instagram at KitCait for my personal page, or at KitBody Fitness on Instagram, and then also on Facebook, Caitlin Patricia Weiler or KitBody as well. So you can reach out to me multiple ways. Just find me somewhere.
And when she's not in studio, she's probably at Kettle Glazed Donuts.
yes.
We all have our
She's
little
never-
cheat day.
Yes.
So
The
thank
cat's
you
out of
for
the
the
bag.
donut. It was delicious. And normally we are here every other Monday live, but every other Monday. But we are not going to be here in 2 weeks. We'll be here in 3 weeks
Skipping President's Day.
on Monday, February 26th. And our guest is still to be announced, but it could be very exciting, having to do with a certain World Series championship team.
That's right. Hopefully some spring training coverage.
And we also have announcements from inside the show to make on that show that will be exciting and sad and interesting, maybe. So thank you for tuning in. Richard Listens on Sports. We wish you a great, great month of February. We'll see you on Monday the 26th.
Thank you.